Hey everyone, my name is Venti, and it looks like the holiday sales on the Eshop have just kicked off. And even though we're just on the advent of the main course, that being the first party games, there are many fantastic deals already, with many reaching a new low price. So without further ado, let's take a look at the best deals on the Eshop right now. Okay, so let's start with the deals that are across both the Americas and European regions. Let's start with a deal that's ending very soon. The game is Elechead, a very charming puzzle platformer that came to the Switch not too long ago, but I believe it hasn't received the attention it deserves. Now, the main gimmick here is that you can transfer electricity through your head, so whenever you touch the different parts of a level, they will power up. This starts out real simple, like just jumping through a moving platform to turn it on, and then get through a gap. But they change it up real quick and it never gets repetitive. There are a ton of secrets to find, and it is all wrapped up in this great retro aesthetic, with a soothing sound design to match. The only thing that I would say is holding it back a little is the overall length of the game. I finished my first playthrough just short of 2 hours, but I did enjoy it a lot. And with its first ever sale just down to $8, now's a great time to pick this up. Next up is Hades, the game that needs no introduction. Winner of a ton of awards, and with its sequel just announced, if by any chance you haven't picked this up on the Switch yet, now's a great time to do so. As you probably know, Hades is an action roguelite where you play as Zagreus, the son of Hades himself, trying to escape the underworld one run at a time. You will unlock new weapons and abilities to improve your chances of success on subsequent runs and advance the story. It's really hard to say what is the best thing about this game, because it's really that excellently made. But for me, it's all about the combat. It's fast, it's flashy, which not only makes you feel very powerful, but at the same time in danger of losing that run on the blink of an eye. Also, both the weapons and abilities in this game make a great job at enabling you to approach combat in many different ways, encouraging experimentation. And not unlike other titles from Supergiant Games, Hades has an excellent sound design. From the superb voice acting to the sublime soundtrack, which elevates this game to godly status. If you haven't picked this up yet, at its lowest price ever of just $12.49, it's definitely a steal. Now, I'm a huge fan of classic beat 'em ups, they're just great dumb fun. And this next game, The Takeover, is no exception. You play as one of the 3 starting main characters who tries to take justice on their own hand when a criminal organization kidnaps your daughter. The story couldn't be any cheesier, but I just love it. The combat feels really good, and the characters differentiate themselves just enough to make them feel a little bit unique. Basically, you have the 3 archetypes of really heavy, really agile, and then the all-rounder. You have both a punch and a kick button, which makes chaining combos a bit more interesting. The game has some really varied locations and enemy types. 1 second you're against thugs in the street, while the next you're fighting zombie-like creatures in a jungle, and then against robots with machine guns for arms, which of course they use for punching you in the face. There are also a few gameplay changes here and there to break up the pace, like a really cool driving mission. The only downside I would note is the lack of any online modes, because you know beat 'em ups are always much more fun with friends. But on the other hand, for its lowest price ever of just $3, you can't go wrong with The Takeover, especially if you have friends or family over this holiday season to couch co-op it up. Now, this next game is on its first ever sale, the excellent It Takes Two. This is the 2021's Game of the Year, and it just recently arrived on the Switch, and what an excellent game this is. It's an adventure game which has 2-player co-op at its very core. You will play as a troubled married couple who are planning on getting a divorce. You both soon find yourselves trapped in the body of your daughter's dolls, and must work together to reach her to try to return to your human form. It really is a heartwarming story, but not only that, the gameplay is really engaging, and it changes every so often that it never gets to feel repetitive. It also comes with a body pass so you can play with a friend over the internet who might not have the game. The game requires a lot of communication, as you might expect from a co-op-centric game, and here is where my only gripe with the game comes in. As Nintendo doesn't exactly make it easy for us to communicate over the internet, does it? So you'll have to look into things like Discord, which isn't exactly ideal. Of course, it is well worth making it work, and I can't imagine a better game to play with a significant other this holiday season. And for $30 on its first ever sale, well, you don't have to imagine. Okay, so for this next game, I was actually waiting for a sale since I missed the last one, And pro tip, if you don't want that happening to you, consider subscribing so you don't miss any future Stealth videos. Okay, so back to the gaming question. It's Hot Wheels Unleashed, an arcade racer in the toy car universe where you will be racing on the impossible tracks only scientifically possible on a Hot Wheels game. Well, not really, but you get the idea. Toy cars and crazy tracks. Anyway, you start out with 3 random cars and you will unlock much more as you play. This combined with the crazy amounts of customization available is what has got me hooked to this game on PC for a while now and why I wanted to get it for the Switch. And it also has great performance, maintaining a stable resolution at a solid 30 FPS. It has both local and online multiplayer, and at its lowest price ever of $12.49, you really can't go wrong with this one. Okay, next up is Voice of Cards, The Isle Dragon Roars, a JRPG wrapped in a very realized card game package. Here, you will embark on a quest to slay a dragon who now poses a threat to the land around you. The whole game is set up as a classic role-playing tabletop adventure, with cards set down to represent the land you traverse. There is also a narrator who acts as a sort of game master for the adventure. The game features card-based combat with a resource system very reminiscent to Hearthstone or other digital card games where instead of a mana bar, you will gain a resource point each turn. But this is a JRPG through and through, albeit a short one compared to the norm, but I did find the story and the concept it presents to you rather thought-provoking. After all, this game comes from the industry legend Yoko Taro of Nier Automata fame, and although don't expect that level of philosophical predicaments here, it will still make you question the underlying gears that keep turning behind the scenes. It's worth mentioning that the second game, which also has the same card game system as this one, Voice of Cards Forsaken Maiden, is also unsold, and with both at their lowest price ever of just $18, these RPG card games are definitely worth a look. Now, I love management games. I have a ton of them on the Switch, and you know, some are good, some are bad, and most of them are pretty ugly. And Jurassic World Evolution, well, let's just say it's not bad. It does suffer from a lot of performance issues, especially in handheld mode, but at this point, it just comes with the territory when it comes to these types of games. What you get here is a pretty amazing dinosaur park sim, where you will embark on different missions which have a set of goals you must complete. You will of course be building a lot of facilities and attractions in your park, including restaurants, restrooms, but most importantly, dino enclosures. And the dinosaurs in here have really great animations and overall look really cool. Another really cool aspect of the game is that you can control the vehicles manually, so you can get on a helicopter and use a tranquilizer gun to try to neutralize escaped dinosaurs. This is overall a pretty deep management sim, so if you're into the genre at its lowest price ever of just $18, you really can't miss this one. Just be aware of the performance issues. Next up is Yooka-Laylee and the Impossible Lair, a 2.5D platformer where you once again will play as Yuka the Chameleon and Laylee the Bat on their quest to thwart the plans of the evil capital B. Now, this is a great platformer, which is very reminiscent of the gameplay of the Donkey Kong Country series, where you will try to reach the end of a level while a bunch of baddies stand in your way. You have access to things like a roll attack, and with Laylee's help, you can hover while airborne. However, get hit and Laylee will start flying scaredly, so either try to reach for her before she completely flies off, or you're gonna have to continue on without her. And if you get hit once more, you will have to restart the level entirely. There is also this very cool overworld which has you solve light puzzles, has a lot of secrets to uncover, and even has ways to alter each of the platforming levels with a twist. From the very start of the game, you can have a go at the titular Impossible Lair, but it is extremely tough, as clearing each of the levels frees up a member of the Battalion, who will act as a sort of hit point at the Impossible Lair. So going in without these aids is quite honestly a pretty impossible task. The game is really charming and one of my favorite 2D platformers on the Switch, and if you haven't tried this at its new lowest price of just $5, you gotta give this one a go. Now, there are a lot of Pokemon-like games out there, but this next one, Monster Sanctuary, really changes up the formula quite a bit by being a Metroidvania in addition to a creature tamer. How it works is that instead of having that real-time combat, you have a turn-based 3-on-3 creature battler. They have a type with strengths and weaknesses and level up by gaining experience, just like Pokemon. But there is also this sort of combo system, where depending on the order and the effectiveness of your attacks, you can really stack damage up, so there is that different layer of strategy there. The real fun, in my opinion, comes in traversing the world. Remember the HMs in Pokemon? Yeah, those boring moves that you had to teach a Pokemon in order to unlock different parts of the world. Imagine that, but having them actually give you additional platforming abilities. I honestly wish that was the case in the modern open world Pokemon games. Anyway, all the monsters here have their own skill tree, so you can tailor their build to your team's strategy, and in some cases you can even evolve some monsters. The game has had a lot of free updates that added stuff like new monsters, areas, online PvP, even a randomizer mode. And at an all-time low of just $6.79, this is a game you might want to catch this sale. The next game on the list is the excellent Far Lone Sails. For me, this game is quite similar to the likes of Limbo and Inside, which are very atmospheric puzzle platformers. In Far, however, you're managing your steam vehicle, which is your main way of traversing the barren wasteland of this post-apocalyptic world you find yourself in. The puzzles and mechanics of the game are really well made, and combined with the excellent music and ambience, makes for a very memorable experience. The only thing to note here is the short duration of the game, which is kind of commonplace in these kinds of games. Anyway, the game has a sequel in Far Changing Tides, which is also on sale and for its lowest price ever, but still at a much higher price point. So if you haven't tried this and you enjoy a good atmospheric puzzle game, this is definitely worth a look at an all-time low of just $3. Up next are two games that I truly love, Retro City Rampage and its spiritual successor Shakedown Hawaii. Both games take heavy inspiration from the old school 2D top-down Grand Theft Auto games. While Retro City Rampage has an 8-bit look to it, Shakedown Hawaii goes for that natural progression with a 16-bit look. In both games, you will be free to roam an open world, finding activities and doing missions to advance the really ridiculous story, and have a ton of pop culture 80s references, especially Retro City Rampage. They are a real love letter to that classic era of 8-bit and 16-bit gaming, everything from the design, the look, the gameplay, and the references. Now, I would say the main differences between the games is that Shakedown Hawaii has much more of that refined gameplay, with 3 different characters who play very differently, and even kind of a management mechanic where you acquire various businesses that give you different benefits. On the other hand, Retro City Rampage has much more of that ridiculousness, and pulls on those nostalgia strings a bit harder if you grew up on that 8-bit era. But if you only had to pick one, I would go with the one whose look you enjoy the most. Both are on sale for just $6, but oddly enough, over in the European regions, Shakedown Hawaii has a slightly higher price tag. But anyway, at this price point, it would be a crime not to pick any of these up. Now, this next game I haven't actually played and just picked up on the sale, so do keep that in mind. The game is Lacuna, and it's a very narrative-driven point-and-click detective game set in a sci-fi noir setting. In the game, you're trying to solve a very high-profile murder, while at the same time dealing with your own personal problems like trying to repair a broken marriage. The main gimmick here is that the choices that you make are not reversible, as the game autosaves to encourage having to deal with the consequences of your actions. Sometimes this would mean really trying to focus on cross-checking information before committing to a particular course in your investigation. There is also a timer, which encourages a more natural approach to conversations and a palpable tension to them. You can always turn this timer off in case you would like a more relaxed approach. It has a really cool pixel art look to it, and even has a bit of voice acting, as your character would sometimes act as a narrator, but overall it is heavily text-based. This being a point-and-click adventure, which for sure is a pretty polarizing genre, would have many people turn away, but if you're into this kind of games, for its lowest price ever of just $2, and with all the praise it's received, it's definitely worth a buy. Next up is a marquee pinball Metroidvania out there. Of course, it's Yoku's Island Express, and if you haven't played this, you are really missing out. You play as Yoku, a little dung beetle who just started out on his job as island messenger. Yeah, I bet you didn't see that coming. But what I bet you didn't see coming is such an odd mix of genres. Metroidvania and pinball. blending so well together in this beautiful and charming game. You begin your adventure with the goal of delivering mail to the inhabitants of your new island home. This is much easier said than done though, as you will encounter many obstacles along the way, and your own inability to jump can make this task daunting. Luckily for Yoku, there are a ton of pinball style paddles which can send the little ball he pushes around flying and him along with it. The gameplay is excellently done, as is the feeling of opening up the island more and more. The presentation here is also one of the best aspects of the game, with the bright, cheery and beautifully hand-painted environments, to the absolutely lovely soundtrack that would be a perfect fit to any Disney movie. Now, at its lowest price ever of just $4, this is definitely one you should check out. A fairly recent game, Curse to Golf is a wonderful 2D golf game with roguelike elements. Here, you will play as a freshly deceased pro golfer who perished just on the verge of taking gold in a big championship. He now finds himself in golf purgatory and must clear 18 holes to escape this curse and return to his shot at the gold. His shot at life. The gameplay here is what really shines. It has simple yet very tight shot controls where you must time your button presses to get the desired angle and force of your shots. This can be a bit tricky though, and many a time your ball will end up somewhere else entirely from where you'd imagined it. This often means having to deal with a lot of crazy hazards from shambling zombies to TNT. The whole gameplay feels very good, great shot mechanics with the crazy mini golf-like courses. You also get ace cards which give you one-time powers over your shot to get out of a tight spot. Now, the roguelike elements aren't exactly of the progression variety, but rather in the randomized nature of the level layouts. No two runs are going to be quite the same. The game can be really difficult, and do be aware of that. This has been the most contentious point in this game, basically having to restart a run from scratch without any feeling of progression in the form of permanent upgrades. In terms of presentation, the game has a ton of personality, pushing the whole golf theme, like the shop being called Eternity, or having the moon in the background be a giant golf ball. Now, on its first ever sale on the EU regions and in the Americas down to just $15, maybe it's time to put this one in your library. This next one is a personal favorite of mine, which is Huntdown. This plays very much like an old arcade run and gun game with a heavy 80s aesthetic that just takes you back to that time. You play as a bounty hunter, and each mission has you tracking down a target in classic side-scrolling shoot 'em up. The atmosphere in this game is amazing. If you grew up with films such as RoboCop, The Terminator, or Die Hard, this just nails that whole feeling just right. From the over-the-top criminal gangs that go from the violent hockey mob all the way to cybernetic samurais. But apart from getting that style and feel just right, the gameplay here doesn't disappoint at all. Sure, it's a basic formula, shoot your way through from point A to point B, but it is oh so well executed. The enemy variety will always keep you on your toes, but at the same time you will always be finding new weapons to approach the different situations. It's just very fast paced, and if you die, bam, you're back at the last checkpoint in no time. Also, there is a boss fight at the end of each level. These are the bounties, and they can be extremely over the top sometimes, but they're really cool. So yeah, this is one of my faves here. They really just take that 80s theme and dial it up to 11. At its lowest price ever of $3.59, this is an absolute must buy. It even has local 2-player co-op thrown in for good measure. Up next is Night in the Woods, a beloved game. In this very narrative-driven adventure, you play as May, who after some time away returns to her rural hometown of Possum Springs, seeking the friends she once knew. Everything has changed now, as life has seemed to happen for seemingly everyone but May. This is a very thought-provoking, introspective game about life, growth, and the internal struggles one can find themselves in from the pressures of both the external world and our inner selves. Of course, I don't want to spoil anything, just know that the story here is the main course and the gameplay takes much more of a backseat, feeling like just a way to advance the story forward rather than being engaging in and of itself. Another great thing about Night in the Woods is the characters, as they are extremely well written and have more than enough depth that you genuinely start to care for them. The mystery surrounding Possum Springs keeps the story moving forward at a pretty nice pace. Anyway, it's been a full year since this game has gone on sale, so at an all-time low of $8.54, you might want to grab this as we might not see another sale in a while. Loop Hero is our next game, and this one is always kind of difficult to explain. It's a roguelike deck builder RPG where instead of directly controlling your character, you instead have control of the world around him. Your hero will just walk around a mostly barren loop at first, and it's your job to place monster spawners for him to slay. This will earn you experience, gear, and cards that can be used to place even more monsters with. See the loop here? With the cards, you can also place landmarks and different features which will add modifiers to the loop or to certain tiles. You will also gain resources which you can later use to develop a town, a hub-like area where you can unlock stuff like permanent upgrades, new cards to place on future runs, and even new hero classes. As you lap around the loop, the monsters will become much stronger, but so will you. If at any point in the loop you die, you will lose most of the resources on you. This can be avoided by retreating on the camp tile, and you should do this when you start to notice the enemies becoming unmanageable. So as you can see, the name of the game here is Risk Management. From the pace of putting up monster tiles to knowing exactly when to retreat. There is also an element of figuring out the interactions between the cards you place, which may transform depending on which one you place adjacently. This simple formula quickly gets very addictive, and luckily the switchboard is really well made. The inclusion of touch controls is especially appreciated here. Right now, at its lowest price ever of $6.64, it's certainly worth a place in your library. Okay, so these next games are from the Americas eShop. Now, if you're over in the EU or Australia regions, you can use the timestamp below to jump ahead to your deals. Or you could always switch your eShop region. Okay, this next game I was absolutely addicted to on PC, and having it come to the Switch was an absolute nightmare for my productivity. It's Crypt of the Necrodancer, a very unique rhythm roguelike where you are adventuring down a tile-based dungeon with the objective of reaching the Necrodancer at the lowest levels of its crypt. The really unique thing here is that there will be a song playing on every level, and every enemy will act exactly to the beat of the song, and you must too, because a multiplier for your earned gold will grow by staying in sync. The controls are super simple. The directional buttons will have you move, attack, loot, everything and anything in that direction, and then you will be able to drop bombs or use items or spells with a few other buttons. As with many roguelike games, you will die a lot, but you will be able to buy upgrades and even entirely new characters with different styles of play for future runs. Now, as you know, a rhythm game can live or die by its soundtrack, and Crypt of the Necrodancer is no slouch here. It has such an amazing soundtrack that even the shopkeeper in the game can't help but sing along to it. At an all-time low of only $4, this is well worth adding to the library. Next up is Crash Team Racing, one of the best kart games out there. Many people like to think that this is only good on the platforms where Mario Kart doesn't exist, but that really isn't the case here. Not only is this game certainly polished enough to stand out on its own against the competition, but it also changes things up in key aspects to really differentiate itself enough to be the kart game of choice for many players. One of those key factors being that this is a much more unforgiving game and has a much higher learning curve. Sure, it's pretty easy to grasp the main concepts, stay on the tracks, grab a few items, get lucky, and then win the race. Well, it's not that easy though, as the importance of mastering the drift mechanic is paramount here. Sure, there is rubber banding and luck involved, but it really pales in comparison to the importance of drifting. Aside from that, the driving is tight, with what feels like having much more control over your kart than in other racers. The tracks themselves are pretty cool, with plenty of opportunity to hop on a small shortcut here and there with a well-timed jumper boost. It has both local and online multiplayer, and it even has a campaign mode, which made me go back to my times with Diddy Kong Racing back in the day. Anyway, there's a shop where you can unlock more characters, skins, and card customization with in-game currency or just swiping your credit card if you're into that sort of thing. I would have liked if they kept it for skins only and all the characters be unlocked right from the start, but it's a minor gripe really, as the characters themselves are not really that expensive. You just have to wait for them to rotate into the store. Overall, this is a great game, and for its lowest price ever of just $14, if you're into the kart racer genre, this is a great pickup. Now, for the next game, we have an excellent collection of platformers in the Crash and Sane Trilogy, which are remasters from Naughty Dog's classics back on the PS1. Now, these are all excellent platformers in their own right, but beware, they are very challenging, especially the first one. Even though I think the difficulty was slightly toned down for it with some checkpoint adjustments and an automatic difficulty scaling based on your deaths, but a big part of the fun in these games is in overcoming that challenge. And I'm glad these changes aren't as severe as to dumb the games down. There is a ton of fun to be had in these titles. From the great corridor sections to the hidden paths to be found, which are key to finding all the crates to unlock that level's gem. Now, at its lowest price ever of just $16, any fan of the platforming genre should have this in their collection. On that same note, we also have the Spyro Reignited Trilogy for sale. While this is also a collection of 3 remastered games, these lean more into the side of classic 3D platforming, with much more open-ended levels which incentivize exploration. You will be rewarded for going off of the main path, as there are many secrets and collectibles to uncover. Your main mission will be to free the rest of the dragons who have just been turned into crystals, and standing between you and this goal is a cast of colorful enemies. Now, these are never too difficult and are much more of a nuisance than an actual threat to you. Sometimes you will need to use your Dragon Breath or Charge Attack to break their guards, nothing too complex, and overall this extends to the rest of the game. And as you can probably tell, the game strives for fun rather than challenge. And they really do achieve it. Even though each individual game is quite short, it keeps you smiling the whole way through. It has a lot of fun boss fights, and even a few really cool minigames sprinkled here and there. All in all, at its lowest price ever of $16, you really can't go wrong with this one. Next up is yet another collection. It's a Diablo Primeval collection. This bundle includes both Diablo 2 Resurrected and Diablo 3 with its expansions. Now, Diablo 3 is quite an excellent game on the Switch. The form factor is great for those quick rounds. It has really great multiplayer, both local and online, and the controls feel really tight. Anywhere from menu management to the actual action, which is what this game is really all about. Sadly, it doesn't have crossplay, but from what I can tell, there is still a very dedicated Switch community playing each season. Now, let's go to Diablo 2 Resurrected, and big disclaimer, I'm an OG Diablo 2 fan, so when I heard that Diablo 2 was coming to the Switch, I was really excited. Sadly, this game isn't as good as Diablo 3 in terms of the Switch port. The controls are a bit awkward, and targeting specific enemies feels much harder. Still, this is one of the best ARPGs that ever existed, and I still get the chills whenever I hear the Act 2 harem music kick in. Man, what an amazing soundtrack this game has. So, even when the Switch port is a little bit clunky, its saving grace is that it's probably the single most defining game in the ARPG genre in the palm of your hands, and that it also acts as a pretty nice companion if you already have the PC version, as even though it also doesn't have crossplay, it does have cross progression, so you could get some leveling up on the Switch and then just pick up where you left off on PC afterwards. Now, the thing to note here is the price tag. The collection is at its lowest price ever of just $19.79, and that's $10 cheaper than the lowest price ever of just Diablo 3 alone. And you also get Diablo 2 with it. So yeah, a great pickup if you're into the genre. And lastly, these deals are only for the EU and AU regions, and here we got some really interesting titles that either haven't been on sale before or very rarely. Up next is Sniper Elite 4. Now, I am an average enjoyer of the Sniper Elite series, but not only that, ever since the series came to the Switch, I've been hooked. Now, I'm sure there's a story here. And yeah, there is, but what this game really is a sandbox for killing in the craziest ways. Headshot 3 guys with 1 bullet? Check. Ye old-fashioned nutshot? Check. Environmental kill by falling bell? Check. The iconic X-ray kill cams never get old. Sadly, it doesn't have split screen co-op, but it does have it online, in addition to PvP modes for up to 8 players. The game has a ton of value, especially if you're like me and like to take entire enemy regiments by picking off unsuspecting soldiers one by one, all while remaining undetected. The game is at its all-time low of $13.99, and it only goes on sale on rare occasions, so if you had this on your sights, now's the time to pull the trigger. It's also worth noting that the Digital Deluxe Edition is also on sale at its lowest price ever, so if you're looking for more content, including the iconic Target Führer mission, this edition is $21.99, which is great value. So that was it for this sales video. I really hope you liked it or helped you find something new. And if it did, please leave a like, maybe consider subscribing for more content like this. Anyway, happy holidays everyone, and if you're watching this all the way to the end, I really appreciate you. I'll be trying to put up more content next year, so yeah, I'll see you guys next time. Bye!